Good evening and welcome to the Brea City Council Candidate Forum. Let us begin this evening with a salute to our nation's flag. Please rise and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. My name is Jan Wagner. The League of Women Voters, the City of Brea, and the Brea Chamber of Commerce, the candidates and I, welcome you to tonight's forum. The League of Women Voters is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization that has been active for 100 years. While we never endorse a candidate or a party, we are directly involved in shaping the important issues that keep our communities strong. As a League member, I have the opportunity to contribute in ways that have a great impact on local, state, and even national issues. If you are interested in learning about how you can make a similar impact, I encourage you to visit our website at lwvnoc.org. Membership is open to both men and women. In accordance with pandemic guidelines, we are conducting this forum without any in-person audience tonight. The good news is that you are all watching comfortably from home, on your televisions or computers, either as we broadcast live or as you make use of available links, the city website, or on television channels to watch the full recording later. Many of you have emailed questions to us in advance. As is often the case, we have received many more questions than is going to be possible for us to ask this evening, but we will do our very best. Questions have been combined to avoid duplication, they have been screened to eliminate personal attacks, and they have also been removed if they do not pertain to the duties of City Council. Assisting us this evening are our timekeepers, Patty Chikahisa and Deborah Vatz. I'd like now to introduce our candidates. They are seated in an order that was determined this evening by drawing lots. First is Christine Merrick, then Marty Siminoff, Tyler Baugh, and Robin Neufeld. It is now time for our opening statements, and the candidates will have 2 minutes each for their opening statements. First, again as determined by lot, is Christine Merrick. Ms. Merrick.
Good evening. Thank you to the Brea Chamber of Commerce and the North Orange County League of Women Voters for putting on this forum, especially in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. I have had the honor of serving Brea as a city council member for the last 8 years. I ran to represent the voices of Brea's younger families, whose interests include public safety, parks and community services, schools, and of course, traffic. I am proud of the work that the City Council has done over this time, creating the Community Benefit and Economic Development Fund, investing in an irrevocable trust to help offset our pension obligations, rebuilding the Laurel Magnet School Playground, also known as Lagos de Moreno Park, managing the costs of our water supply via investments in the California Domestic Water Company, approving the first workforce housing project in Brea, and all of this while maintaining healthy reserves and, of course, a balanced budget. My political philosophy drives my decision-making and includes the core values of fiscal responsibility, independent thinking, community involvement, consensus building, and a focus on all ages in our community, from families with young children to our seniors. My main priorities for the next 4 years include maintaining a high level of city services within a balanced budget while focusing on our unfunded pension liabilities, helping Brea businesses reopen and rebound, and continuing prudent investments in city infrastructure, including our roads, water and sewer systems, and parks. Thank you.
Thank you. Next for their opening statement is Mr. Siminoff.
I'd like to also thank the Chamber and the League of Women Voters for hosting us tonight. Looking at this past year and demands placed not only on the council, but the entire community, it has actually been one heck of a year so far. Assuming the mayor's office was an honor that my colleagues provided to me. The year started off normally, but then came COVID-19. Not only Brea faced this pandemic and the new issues it brought to bear, but so has the county, the state, and the entire country. For instance, the council was preparing a budget, but then had to revisit the process. I can proudly say Brea was able to pass a balanced budget without touching our reserves, and Brea has maintained a 25% reserve balance, and that balance has remained in place. That was the result of the council maintaining a fiscally conservative approach, one that 6 years ago allowed Brea to put $6 million in a separate account to cover future pension obligations. That account has grown to almost $8 million, and we have been able to maintain our investment with our street paving, water line improvements, and so much more. The key that's allowed this to occur is Brea having experienced leadership. In the midst of the pandemic, the hands-on experience of my colleagues and I possess has allowed Brea to stay fiscally sound in order to deal with the pandemic impacts. Some days, I would have to exchange calls with city staff 8 or 10 times, have meetings in the morning, the afternoon, and make sure the needs of the community came first. As mayor, I provided a series of public service announcements to the community regarding the pandemic. Our city channel is dedicated to providing information pursuant to the pandemic, and safety measures are encouraged. In fact, thanks to you, Brea's infection rate per 10,000 people is extremely low. Brea has also worked regionally to ensure Orange County cities are not left behind. Every Thursday night, I am on a Zoom call with the county's other 33 mayors, and a Zoom call is a phrase that we've all now learned.
Thank you, Mr. Siminoff. Mr. Ball.
Good evening, and thank you everyone for allowing us to be here and hosting this event. My name is Tyler Ball, and I'm a husband, father, teacher, and concerned citizen. I'm a third-generation Brean who has fond memories of spending days here at my grandma's house and attending Mariposa Elementary. I'm running for city council because it's time for a new voice to represent the city. It's time for the city to add more family-focused and more representation for young families, and to make sure that every corner of Brea has a voice. I'm running to make sure that Brea stays a family-friendly city and continues to attract new families to call home. I feel families are the lifeline of Brea. We need to make sure schools, entertainment, youth sports, and safety are the forefront of our city and continue to be so. We need to make sure that Brea continues to pay down debts and find new revenue streams in a post-COVID world. Brea will not survive financially if we just simply maintain the status quo. It's time for new ideas to increase revenue, and we need to start with the Brea Mall, as COVID has caused a lot of issues with this. The mall for a long time has been the flagship of Brea, but in a changing world, we need to find new ways to adapt and develop ways to utilize the space that's offered there. I want to make sure we bring long-lasting businesses to Brea that will allow people an opportunity to work, shop, and live in Brea. We need to continue to keep a balanced budget, which the other candidates have done a great job of. And I promise to do what's always right for Brea, and we'll make sure that every decision I make has been researched and investigated from all angles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Ms. Neufeld.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I've been a homeowner here for the last 6 years in this beautiful city. In the past, I've always placed children in the forefront of my community involvement, but now I'm ready to focus on the community at large. As a council member, I'll place an emphasis on leading our city out of these unprecedented economic times we face. And as a united community, I believe that we must place our focus on maintaining the small town feel while still growing our economic base. Together, we will ensure Brea supports its public servants, small businesses, and the community as a whole. I've been a financial services leader for well over 20 years, and I'm involved in many financial aspects of the business, as well as oversight of multiple employees and processes. I maintain a reputation for honesty, integrity, and dedication. When COVID-19 forced the shutdown, I worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week, helping small businesses stay afloat. And I do these things because I care and I want to make a difference. And as someone who prides herself on integrity, I'm self-funding my campaign. I don't want your donations. I do ask that if you want to make a donation, consider our wonderful Brea schools, consider the wonderful programs that Brea High School has to offer, because I'm here to help Brea, not take away from her. So please remember that, because donations to my campaign would be inappropriate. I plan on the following: working to reduce Brea's unfunded pension liability, helping Brea schools, promoting term limits, because let's be honest, who wants to see me sitting up here in my 70s? And I plan on working to create a fun space for the teens, possibly turning the Tower Records into an arcade or something fun for them. Let's work collaboratively together as a community so that we can thrive as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. And that ends our opening statements. And so we'll move on to the questions we have received from the public. And we'll start with Mr. Siminoff, and we'll start with a fairly general question. What do you see as Brea's greatest challenge, and how would you address it as a member of the City Council?
I think the greatest challenge is maintaining fiscally sound. And that's something that this council and I have been involved in for a number of years now. We've maintained a balanced budget. When the COVID hit, we were able to go ahead and approve a budget, even midstream, because in our 18-19 budget year that ended, we had reserves left over, reserves over expenditures of approximately $2.3 million. Those dollars went to help us make our budget balanced. And then I hate those signs coming up. And then this upcoming year, we were expecting a surplus of approximately $5.2 million of revenue over expenditures. Now, we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. But again, we've done a great job of maintaining our balanced budget. And I just have to say one more thing. I'm 70 years old and I don't mind sitting up here.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh?
Hi.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
It's the biggest issue facing the city, correct?
Yes.
So for me, I think fiscal responsibility is huge, but I think that in a post-COVID world, we have to find ways to really fill some of the businesses that are no longer here. There are businesses popping up, but oftentimes I'll drive by, see a new business coming in, and 3 months later, they're already out of business. I think it's vital for us to be able to recover from a post-COVID economic crisis to attract new businesses that will serve the community, but also help us maintain our fiscal obligation to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld?
All of the infrastructure that's going on. I just think that we all need to come together and agree on something that's going to create and generate revenue. But another big concern that I have is just, since I have teenagers, I know that sometimes teens are wandering out at night and they have nothing to do. And so one of my big concerns is making sure that the children have something to do. And I think that if we created something that would attract the teenagers, it would create more revenue for the city.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Merrick?
Absolutely. Right now, it is the current COVID situation and what that does for our fiscal position. 37% of our general fund revenues are from sales and use taxes. And obviously, with so many businesses shut down and even when they reopen, having a difficult time rebounding, this is something that is a big shock to our city budget. We know the forecast for sales tax revenues have declined precipitously. And we need to help businesses, help the owners, our residents. Helping businesses recover helps our city overall. We've already worked as best we can following the county and state mandates without any further restrictions to burden our local businesses. We have emergency ordinances to allow outdoor operations, but still ensuring safety. So it is absolutely for us managing our expenses, maintaining our services in this post-COVID and COVID recovery.
Thank you. Our next question will go first to Mr. Baugh. We've received several questions regarding finances. The first is, how would you describe Brea's financial position and debt obligations?
So currently, I think that although we've maintained a balanced budget, we do rank on fiscal health, I believe 33 out of 34 for Orange County. which is very concerning for me. I've also been looking through the budget that was posted online for the either 2019, 2020, or 2018, 2019, and I see that there's a lot of issues. Although we're maintaining a balanced budget, there are issues that need to be addressed, the pension liabilities, and then also figuring out ways to cut expenditures in different aspects of the budget. So for me, I think although our financial house may be balanced, we need to find ways to reduce our debt obligations, but also improve our financial health standing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
I think that there's always creative ways that we can look into to see about managing the budget. But if I get elected, then that's something that we would all work together to try to work on farther.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
As a former municipal bond analyst, I look to third-party credit ratings as a better indicator of a municipality's fiscal health than a politically motivated list, as Mr. Baugh referenced, like Mr. Morlock's list. Our current bond rating is a AA. That is because rating agencies look at our overall financial position, our ability to make on-time debt payments, including pension contribution payments, and the level of services that we are providing to our residents and our businesses. Morlock's list penalizes full-service cities like Brea, who have their own police and fire departments. But our residents consistently rank public safety as a very high priority, and local control is key. In addition, Morlock's list does not factor in restricted funds like our PARS Trust for pension obligations. It is a false ranking system that does not paint the full picture of our fiscal health. Our City Council recently revised our reserve policies to increase our reserve level from a low of 10% to at least 25%. This is a sign of a healthy fiscal position.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
I think Christine said quite a bit of what goes on now at the council level with our ratings. But one of the things that we are constantly doing, we're constantly monitoring. We're looking to refinance bonds, to have lower debt payments. When we talk about the list that Mr. Baugh mentioned, as Christine indicated, that is not a fair comparison, because when you have a full-service city compared to a contract city. In other words, many of those cities will contract for police services, for fire services, and they're not paying directly into the pension system that we're paying into, but they're paying it through the county. So they have those obligations. So that is a list that I don't think you should really look at and use as a bearing as to what Brea's fiscal health is.
Thank you. Our next question will go first to Ms. Neufeld, and it is also relative to finances. If elected, what 3 steps would you take to put Brea on sound financial footing?
To put Brea on sound financial footing?
Correct.
So I don't know exactly what they're currently doing right now, but I know that I would need to look at what the financial statements have been over the last years and what type of margins that they have available, what the yield is like. I need to look into that and figure out how I would tackle that, but I would have to work together with my colleagues in order to make that final decision.
Thank you. And Ms. Merrick.
It is my assessment that Brea is already on a sound financial footing. However, there are always additional steps that we can take. We have a very active vacancy review board in the city, such that at any time, if there is an opening in a position, someone retires or leaves to another job, we look very, very deeply at whether and how is the best way to replace or change and maintain the efficiency of services. So we would continue to focus on that on the cost side. We recently opened an additional irrevocable trust that is to fund against our unfunded OPEB, other post-employment benefits, and that is something that we need to fund so that we start setting money aside for that. And then we will, as I said, continue to work on the revenue side. We have motivated businesses who want to reinvest in Brea, and it's important for us to work with them and understand how they are maximizing their investments here in our city.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
You know, I think one of the things to look at when you talk about Brea's fiscal health is to look at what we've actually got. I know we talk about 25% reserves. Christine has mentioned some of the things we do. We look at refinancing our bonds to take advantage of the rates. But when you really look and see what Brea has done, we've got money set aside to help businesses. We've got money set aside for many projects. And I guess that when you look at cities around us that are putting tax measures on, putting other measures on to try to raise revenue, and Brea has not had to do that. And that's because we've been able to maintain ourselves fiscally in a responsible manner. If you were to look at our total reserves, in other words, if we had to reach into our pockets and pull out all of our cash, we would be pulling out about $41 million, which cities around us would just envy to have. So when you ask about Brea's fiscal position and the things that we do to maintain that, I think we've done a good job, and we continue to look, we continue to find things that will help us save. We've consolidated positions, we've consolidated directors' positions. So over the years, we've done everything we need to do to keep Brea healthy.
Thank you. Mr. Ball.
So my big thing would be trying to, again, raise revenue. Even if we maintain current fiscal standing, as Mr. Siminoff and Ms. Merrick had mentioned, we need to find ways in a post-COVID world because, again, we don't know what November holds, we don't know what December holds, we don't know what January holds. And I feel it's vital for the city to continue to attract new businesses that, as Ms. Merrick said, will invest in the long term, but we need to get them here and we need to find a way to attract these businesses to really get them here. Thank you.
Thank you. That actually is a good lead in to our last financial question, and it will go first to Ms. Merrick. How has COVID impacted Brea's future relative to finances?
It absolutely has done so. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have final sales tax numbers. There is a delay in getting those, but we have seen estimates, and they have dropped precipitously. So we already have had to make some tough choices. We were very fortunate, as Mr. Siminoff mentioned, that we had revenues over expenditures that we could use to apply and sort of make up for a sales tax decline for this recently passed fiscal year. But we know that it's going to be tight moving forward, and there's no way around that. So we have to be at our best and looking at how we can provide the level of service that our citizens expect and how we can do that most efficiently.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
And again, we look at positions that we have within the staff. And if there's an empty position, we may let that go. We realize the cost savings. We have our employees that are willing to step up and do the extra duty. We look for ways, like I indicated, to refinance our bonds to pay lower payments. We are doing all those things, I think, that any city could do. We know we're going to be hit. We know there's going to be a shortage of the sales tax, which is one of our primary sources of income. But we work with our businesses. We've worked with them to try to help them get started again, to promote them again. And one of the things that we do regularly is meet with the Chamber of Commerce and see what we can do on our part to help those businesses succeed so that they're coming back and they're being productive and they're working with this community to produce that sales tax that we all depend on. The fact that we know we're going to have a reserve over expenditures is something that we're looking at, and how can we best utilize those dollars to get us through our next fiscal year, because we know there's going to be an impact.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
So I agree with most of what they say. My big thing is I think we, though, need to find businesses that will take the place of the vacant buildings or the buildings that continue to turn over every 6 months. We need to really look at what businesses we want in Brea. For me, I think a lot more family options would be great. I'd like to see, after post-COVID, a lot more outdoor dining. I think it's something that would bring in families, allow the kids to hang out outside, and it would really help to raise the revenue needed. For me personally, I can't speak to a lot of what they said because I don't have access to those numbers on me, but I do agree with what they're saying. I think that we need to really work to get businesses here that will stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
And so actually, I agree with Tyler in regards to more family-oriented options because I have teenage boys. They want something to do. If there were more things in downtown offered, you'd get a lot more incremental business and it would increase our revenue. And the other thing that I'm uncertain of is when I do see these businesses shut down, I wonder, is it not just because of COVID, but if perhaps our rents have escalated and they're not receiving a break. I don't personally know the person that owns the downtown, but I'm wondering if there's any type of breaks that can be provided during this time or something, some sort of incentive to help them bring their business back or reopen.
Thank you. First to receive our next question will be Mr. Siminoff, and it's a question regarding pensions. What steps would you take to address unfunded pension liabilities?
Well, I think we've pretty much mentioned one numerous times here. We set up a separate account, and a few years back, we put $6 million out of our general fund into that account. That account is now worth approximately $8 million. That account can only be used to fund pension obligation. We cannot bring that back to use for any general fund or any other purposes within this community. We're looking at a fund for our other post-retirement benefits also. And that fund will work the same way, where it would be a restricted fund. We have all of our employees now that are paying their full share of the pension obligation, where in the past, the city was paying a percentage. So we've taken the steps necessary to try to control the pension. And again, if you were to take that $8 million that we have sitting there, we could use that to pay our pension debt. But again, we're using that to build the interest. We're using that, and in case we ever really needed to use those dollars, if there was a shortage, which there hasn't been, we could use those dollars.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
For me, I agree with what Mr. Simroff said. My big thing I would do, though, is look at, as they mentioned earlier, phasing out specific positions when retirement happens to reduce the impact of future obligations for the city, including, I don't know off the top of my head, but just looking at reducing positions in the future that would be a burden to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
So one thing I was curious about is since I'm not currently on the council, if there's ever been a time where they've offered a bonus to someone to retire early so that there wouldn't be as much pension to pay out. The other thing I would consider is, I think as Marty stated, put additional monies into some sort of fund, or maybe any funds remaining from revenue from expenditures from the prior years. We could put that toward it. Designate some investment choices typical to a 401k that would try to earn some more money to help pay that down.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
Brea has been at the forefront of trying to reduce our unfunded pension liabilities, but also trying to make progress for other cities or other municipalities. So even before the prior Governor Brown, had a pension reform, which changed the pension equations and decreased the generosity of them. Brea had done their own second tier. That was before I was on the council, but we have continued to try to make those reforms. We were early adopters of the Irrevocable Trust Fund. We've just set up a second trust that we still need to fund. And our goal is to have the value of our annual contribution in any given year set aside in that trust fund. So if we need to touch it, we will be able to. But the intention is to let it grow over time. That's money that we control the investment policy. We're not leaving it to CalPERS.
Thank you. Our next group of questions is relative to housing. The first will go to Mr. Baugh. What balance of housing types, affordable, market rate, permanent, supportive, do you envision for your city?
For me, I definitely think that we need a wider range. Personally, I live in the condominium complex by the Brea Junior High, and I know that there's been a lot of new developments going up around Brea. Something that I think that we need more of is units that are affordable housing and within walking distance to a lot of the areas and the needs of the city, whether it's schools, whether it's shopping centers. For me, I'm fortunate where I live. I could walk to school, I could walk to the Vons, but I think we need to really have a more wide range of it. I think we have plenty of single-family housing, market rate housing, but I think we need to do more for affordable housing within Brea. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
And I apologize, would you repeat the question? I had a hard time hearing it.
Certainly. What balance of housing types, affordable, market rate, permanent, supportive, do you envision for your city?
So here's what I would like to see. I would like to see more single-family homes available. I know that I had a friend that was trying to find something recently, but they had to move over to Fullerton because they just couldn't find anything to purchase in the price range. And it's very disappointing because there's lots of young families that I would like to be able to see have a yard for their kids to play in. I'm fortunate, both my husband and I work, but some people don't have that luxury. So I would like to see something more affordable along the lines of single-family homes, not just condominiums.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick?
Well, the state has helped us out with questions such as this one. We actually have a regional housing needs assessment, which is basically a mandate from the state for each region, and that number is then apportioned to each city. And essentially, while we are not required to build the actual homes, we are required to sort of set the table in terms of what we allow, such that developers are able to come in and there is the ability to build a certain number of housing units at different levels of affordability. So recently our allocation jumped from just under 2,000 units to 2,360 units for the 2011 to 2029 planning period. And the allocation that is requested or required is 667 of those units very low income, 393 low income, 402 moderate income, and 898 above moderate income. I'm fairly certain that we'll be able to fulfill the higher income levels, but not sure that we will be able to build enough or set the table to build enough more affordable.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff?
Well, Christine just ran through all my numbers that I had on the sheet in front of me. But one of the things I think that people need to realize too is for many years Brea's had an inclusionary role. And that rule requires when a home builder comes in, 10% of those rooms have to be in an affordable type purchase. So we've been doing that for years. So you won't know which homes they are. You won't know who's purchasing them at that affordable rate. But they are designed so that we have families that are making a certain amount of money will be able to qualify. One of the other things that I think is important to realize too is, you know, we talk about bringing in all this housing, but we don't have a whole lot of open space left to build on. So that's why when we have projects come in, we're looking very carefully at the type of housing that's coming in. We try to create housing that is not just all, you know, cookie cutters, so to speak. We like to see a different type of housing products come into this community for various families to use.
Thank you. Our next question will go first to Ms. Neufeld, and you did mention Brea. The question is, how do you feel about the recent regional housing needs assessment numbers for Brea? Ms. Merrick mentioned them.
Well, I do appreciate the fact that they're trying to make things affordable. I think that is very important because when people are moving here, a lot of them are moving here for the schools, and sometimes especially right now during COVID, you need one parent to be home, especially if you have small children. And we need affordable housing for those families that only has one person working. So I do like hearing those numbers that, you know, we have 667 very low income, 400 moderate income. So I appreciate that Brea is doing that. And I'm looking forward to, if I am on the council, if I could be more involved in that type of planning.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick?
I think we are lucky that when these arena numbers came out, that Brea's number did not jump as steeply as some of our other local cities, especially inland. I did mention at the end of the last question, I think it's going to be difficult. You know, these are goals, and it is difficult to build that volume of very low income and low income housing. That's been affordable housing has been a goal of our council. And we have some dollars set aside, and we want to build those units, as we say, build more doors. And that's something that is a very high priority. I am hopeful that we can make inroads into these numbers, but they are aggressive.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff?
Yeah, I think Christine kind of touched upon it, but we have dollars set aside that would go for affordable housing projects. And the issue is finding that right project that will maximize the return for the most individuals. And that is why we're holding on to those dollars until that project comes forward. One of the things I think is important in the council was, took a lot of pressure on this one, but we just recently approved a workforce housing project, which was something that was unique to this community, and it's going to be units that will be close to people's jobs, units that will be extremely affordable, and it was a project that I think that brought to Brea a product that didn't exist here. So I think as a whole, this council is looking between our inclusionary rule, between meeting arena numbers where we can, trying to bring in a variety of housing and using our affordable housing dollars, to bring in the right projects, with those things that people want to see happen, we are working on to make them happen.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
I agree with much of what's said. My big thing is, as a teacher, I look at a lot of my students whose family are hard workers, and many of them can't afford to live in the district I work in. So they're forced to either, use somebody else's address to be able to attain those schools. And I think that Brea in the future is going to need young families that can afford to live, work, and send their kids to school in Brea. We can set goals and we can try to do our best, but for a family that's, working, trying to put their kids through a good school, that answer to me is not good enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will go first to Ms. Merrick, and it relates to Brea Envisions. Discuss your goals to balance growth, density, affordability, community culture, and community values as they relate to the recommendations outlined in Brea Envisions.
The biggest thing that we heard from Brea Envisions was the hope to keep Brea's hometown, kind of small town feel. And I absolutely share that hope and that intention. What's interesting is that means something different to everybody who makes that same statement. So what we found is that hometown feel, it varies between who was telling us keep the hometown feel. But out of the Brea Envisions, we went into our core planning effort, and that is something that we want to ramp up again, especially post-COVID, because we have seen that there is development interest coming, and we want to make sure that we are following through on what we heard in Brea Envisions. And the Mercury project that Mr. Siminoff alluded to is one that came through essentially at the same time as that core planning, and it would have been great had we gotten further on that core planning.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
I think Christine mentioned a lot of the aspects of the Envision project, but that project was not something that was council-driven. That was something that was community-driven. So we reached out to the community. We wanted their input, and it was community members that put that project together. It was community members that gave us their vision of what they want Brea to look like. And by utilizing their input, we were able to establish the cores that we can now look at to attract new businesses, to attract other housing opportunities, to attract those things that will make Brea the community that the community asked it to be.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
I don't have much to add on that. I do think that it's important. I'll just say this. I do think it's important to get community input at all levels of local government. And I agree with what they're saying. It's great to get people and fit that vision of Brea. But I do agree with what Ms. Merrick said about everybody's vision for what hometown feel means is different. Everybody's vision of what Brea means is different. So it's important that we really try to get as many voices as we can and then, come to a decision as a whole from that.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
I agree with what everyone is saying on here. I remember back when I was in high school and Brea was one of my rivals. I was very jealous of this city. I thought one day I'd like to move here because it had that very nice small town feel, even though it's still a city within Orange County. And I want this town or this city to continue to have the appeal that it has to me when my sons are older and they have children. I want it to look like that. Thank you.
Thank you. For Mr. Siminoff, homelessness is a big issue in Orange County. How has Brea addressed this issue, and what actions do you believe still should be taken?
Well, I think Brea started early in dealing with the homeless issue. We have a full-time officer that's assigned to just working with our homeless population. They've identified them, they know who they are. Brea also took the steps of joining 13 other North Orange County cities and contributing dollars to what we call the navigation centers. There's one in Buena Park and there's one in Placentia. There are 250 beds now available that we can take the homeless to, and we can give them a shelter where they can get cleaned up, where they can try to get their lives and move forward. We also have our Family Resource Center. Our Family Resource Center has been an excellent avenue for those families that need that extra assistance or need that help or need to find an apartment or something where they can live so they can get their lives back together. We've placed families in there. We've helped homeless get back to where their homes are and get them placed just by the outreach that we have done. So I think Brea is many years ahead of many of the communities around us in working with the homeless.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
I agree with Mr. Simonoff. I think that Brea PD has done a great job with their homeless liaison. I just think that the city should continue to look at this issue and find ways for long-term, not that they're not finding long-term solutions, but be prepared because, again, with COVID-19, we might see a spike in homelessness in the future as foreclosures start to happen, as unemployment benefits run out. So it's important that we always stay one step ahead. And again, as he mentioned, there's families. It's just hard for me because some of my students are homeless. So it's one of those things where I feel like we do a good job here in Brea, and I give credit to the city council. They do a good job. I just want to see us have a long-term plan that includes a spike in the homeless population. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
Yeah, I have to agree. Brea does a great job with this issue. I actually struck up a conversation last week with this homeless gentleman named Tony, and he was in great spirits, and he commented about how often the community is willing to help him. And he has temp jobs, but of course he still can't afford housing. But I think Brea is on the right track, and they're doing a really good job.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
Here in Brea, we take a holistic approach to working with homeless individuals. As has been mentioned, we have our homeless liaison officer who goes out with a team of volunteers consistently doing outreach. It often takes many visits before an individual is willing to accept help. We have access to the shelters and navigation centers, and of course a resource center. I think there is a future opportunity, however, in terms of cost effectiveness of providing that outreach to our homeless population. And there is, we need to research maybe having trained professionals who are focused on mental health and homelessness. It's a very expensive way to provide the service is with a sworn police officer. We have a fantastic homeless liaison officer, so this is not something I'm thinking about immediately, but in the longer term, especially if we see homelessness on the rise, it will require a greater workforce to go out and meet the need.
Thank you. Our next question will go first to Mr. Baugh. What's more important for our city right now, building new homes and commercial space, or rehabbing and better utilizing our existing homes and storefronts?
That's a really good question. I guess if I had to pick one, I would say converting commercial buildings into new residential units where we could bring in young families with affordable housing. I think that we could see the problem of other cities where we have an aged out population that is no longer not contributing, but having young families in. You could see a decline in enrollment in schools in the future. So I think it's important to continue to build affordable housing that can get young working class families in, that will be able to shop Brea, eat Brea, dine Brea, work Brea, live Brea. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
So that is a tough question because right now, because of COVID, I know that enrollment is down at the high school and the junior high. And I think Tyler has a great point of bringing in more families to help fill those spaces in the schools, because I don't know if you've seen the high school lately, but it needs a lot of work. The foundations are cracking, the tennis courts are cracking, they need new HVAC systems. So I would like to see some money going into refurbishing the schools before we consider refurbishing the storefronts. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
That is a very interesting question, and I think really we need to do both, and they both hinge on relationships with the property owners. So we can have a lot of great ideas about what we would like to see. For example, in the Tower Records building, I remember pushing my daughter in a stroller to the Tower Records building when it was a Tower Records building, and she's almost 17, and it closed not too long after that memory. However, we don't own that building. So what we can do from the city side is to develop relationships with our existing property owners and work and talk to them about what are some things that our community would like to see. However, we don't mandate those types of changes. And at the same time, we are building the relationships with developers who want to come into Brea. They may not be here yet, but may have ideas. And it is through that relationship building that we are able to share our community values and help shape what comes next.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
Yeah, again, it's an issue of how much control do we actually have? We have buildings that are empty, but we don't own those buildings. If a building owner wanted to come in, make a proposal to try to convert something, that is something we could look at. When it comes to the schools, and I understand your concern about the schools, that's something that we don't have the dollars that we invest in. That's the school district that does that. And I would hope that the school district has the ability to do the repairs that are needed. But with regards to housing issues in conversion in certain businesses, we always work with the chamber to bring back businesses, to try to bring them back into the fold. And we work with our businesses to try to help them by not charging fees for certain activities, to bring them back, to get them whole. And again, with some of these buildings that people talk about converting, if the property owner doesn't want to convert them, we can't order them to be converted.
Thank you. Our next question goes first to Ms. Neufeld, and it is, quote, "We talk about congestion, traffic, and a reduction in our carbon footprint, pardon me. Aside from mass transit, how would you propose to implement improved and open space within our existing infrastructure?"
Well, I think we'd have to work with other cities to accomplish something like that because we have the 57 freeway, we have Imperial Highway. I know right now sometimes my husband will take different routes just to get to Orange. He'll take side streets, Rose to Tustin Avenue. But it's really something that I believe we'd have to work with other cities. But due to COVID, I know myself, I've been mandated frequently to work more from home. So I don't feel that during this time we're going to have as much of an issue, especially when my headquarters does decide to go back. A lot of people are preferring to work from home and they're giving people that option. So I think down the road, I don't think that's something that we need to worry about so much.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
Traffic congestion has been a topic as long as I've been paying attention to what people are saying here in the city of Brea, and it's really because of the fact that people drive through our town to go to other places, and all of us living here are driving throughout the city. One of the things that we can do is continue to locate housing closer to jobs. So the Mercury project, that is the first of its kind to have workforce housing, is something that we are interested in seeing more of potentially. We also have always, as long as I've known Brea, had an interest in open space. And anytime that we can find a way to preserve open space, that's something that we have always been interested in doing.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
When we talk about traffic, and again, as been indicated, traffic is always a topic whenever anybody talks about development or somebody talks about any time about getting from one side of town to the other. One of the things that's Brea's great resource is because of the shopping and the commercial properties we have. From a nighttime population of 45,000, we go to a daytime population of over 100,000. So that creates a lot of the traffic and the congestion. We look at projects as they're coming in and we ask them for mitigation factors. We ask them to find ways to help the traffic flow better, whether it's synchronization of signals, which we've done on many of our streets and we continue to look at. We will look at traffic calming measures where we can, and we look at other avenues of trying to control the flow of traffic and the speed of traffic through this community. And as was just indicated, open space is a priority to the residents of this community. And we do strive to keep open space where we can, create parks where we can, and allow for those family resources to exist.
Thank you. Mr. Ball.
I agree with what the fellow candidates have said. For the most part, my only thing I would like to see is, as I mentioned, more developments like the Mercury Project, where we can get affordable housing and workforce housing, where people can live, work, and walk to their nearby, amenities, whether it's restaurants, whether it's shopping centers, grocery stores. That way, it will alleviate some traffic. It won't alleviate all of it. As I mentioned, I do know that Brea is a daytime city where it gets really busy. People drive through it. So my big thing would just be try to look at more, as they mentioned, housing units that would be within walking distance to various goods. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question goes first to Ms. Merrick. If you could change one thing in our zoning code, what would it be and why?
So we recently adopted a new zoning, I'm going to draw a blank. We just did the Mercury with it. The planned, what is it? The PC zone, that's what I call it. So I'm going to go with PC zone because I drew a blank. But I actually was not supportive of that particular type of zoning, because I think that it provides essentially a developer the opportunity to write the zoning as they want to see it. And that's something that I didn't support at the time. I did support the Mercury project, so just to be clear. But that's something, the PC zone is something that I'm still not comfortable with, even though I have seen it used successfully. I believe there are some issues with that. So that is one thing that I would prefer not in the code.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
I think one of the first things that when it comes to zoning that I think is important to any city is maintaining local control. And we need to be able to maintain the local control of our city and what goes and where and how it's built. With regards to the PC zone that Councilmember Merrick mentioned, that is something that this council adopted. And I think one of the benefits that it allowed us to do, especially with the Mercury project, was to include a development agreement. And by including the development agreement, we were able to put in there certain items that we felt were important to the city, to this community, and to allow that to actually increase the affordable units that were required to a number that was much greater than what was required. So I think by implementing that PC zone that we were able to have greater control, and we were able to work with the developer to bring a project that benefits all.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
I don't really have much to add. I'll just say that I agree that that type of zoning would be beneficial to the community. I know not everybody may be on board with it, but by allowing workforce housing, it will help the city maintain its feel, but also provide a place for young families to be able to afford to live and work in Brea. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
I don't have anything to add to what everyone else said. They made great comments.
Okay, thank you. So this is a very general question, and it is going first to Mr. Siminoff. Please explain the council's role and responsibilities, and what have you done to prepare for this responsibility?
Well, the council's roles and responsibilities are first to make sure that the needs of the community are met. One of the things the council does each year is we have a list of priorities. Our priorities include meeting those goals that the city has actually indicated. Well, public safety is a goal, infrastructure is a goal, open space is a goal, and we strive to maintain those goals that the community has told us is important to them. We is preparing for this role. Well, I was a staffer in the police department. I was retired as a police captain. That taught me a great deal about local government. And then when I've been in this position for a number of years now, and my experience here, I think has been valuable in that I bring some institutional knowledge that many of my colleagues don't have. And that institutional knowledge has allowed them to understand how certain decisions were made in the past and how we're moving forward. So I've spent a number of years working on the council on a regional basis and on a statewide basis also.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
First and foremost, I think the job of city council is to serve the community and listen to the needs of the people that they're serving, whether it's the people that live in, $1 million homes or the people that live in an affordable housing unit. It's important for every Brea citizen to have a voice. As far as what's prepared me, this is my first go at it, so I'm here trying to learn and try to understand, how I can help make our city even stronger in the future. I guess the only thing I'll say is I'm willing to work hard and learn from my colleagues and take in any advice and listen to people that are smarter than me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
So for me, I feel that my role and responsibility would be to serve the people, be an advocate, be the eyes and ears, not just come to decisions on my own. I have to work with my colleagues. And I believe that the 25 years that I've been in finance, that's prepared me with all the relationships that I've built and I've made throughout the years. I'm able to work with people as a team. And I think that this is something that I'm ready for.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
Well, Brea is a general law city, and we operate under the council manager format. So the city council is the legislative body for our city. So that means that we set the priorities for the provision of public services to our community, and then we adopt, the ordinances and the resolutions that are required and related to all of those policies. So the city council has the hire and fire authority for two positions, our city manager and our city attorney. And the city manager is really the trained professional who oversees the daily work of the city. As council members, we also serve on various regional, state, and even federal boards, commissions, and committees. And of course, we are cheerleaders for our city. But what we do not do is the daily work of our city staff. Prior to running for city council, I served on our planning commission, which was a great learning experience and really helped me understand the role of the city council, but also all that our city does.
Thank you very much. The next question goes first to Mr. Baugh. And Mr. Baugh, this question was directed directly to you. On your webpage, you state there needs to be more city events. How do you propose to pay for those events, and what events do you have in mind?
So by city events, maybe that's my fault for not clarifying. I'm not saying the city would pick up the bill. We'd look at sponsors, but one of the great things that the city's done is Taste of Brea. But I used to play in a pickup soccer league before COVID right at the Brea Junior High. And I can't tell you how many people would come by and say it'd be great to have some sort of weekend tournament to really bring in. And you could get, vendors there, you could get businesses there, you could bring in food trucks, you could bring all types of things. So for me, it's about bringing more family-focused events. I know when I used to work at the movie theater back in the day on Birch Street, it seemed like there were more events happening every couple of months, and now it just seems once or twice a year. So I try to bring that feel back to Brea.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld, do you want to add to that?
Sure. So it's a tough issue because I feel like we're still only in the first phase of COVID, and there's going to be another phase and probably a third phase. So I don't know when we can start having events like that again, but I love the idea because I would love to just go hang out and play soccer or baseball and have the food trucks. I think that sounds like a great idea. And I think food truck personnel would be inclined to do something like that because obviously it's going to be more revenue for them. But I don't think it's anything that we can really put on the table at this time because we don't know what the future looks like right now.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick?
I think one of the things that I miss most in this current COVID environment is all of the city-sponsored events that we haven't had since March, and also those sponsored by the Chamber and other entities, including our downtown Brea ownership. It's important to realize that probably the reason that there are just generally speaking fewer of them not related to COVID is the costs of those events generally are higher than any revenues that they bring in. Probably the Taste of Brea is an exception to that because I think that's a fantastic fundraiser and also a super fun time every year. But that is the difficulty, and that will be the difficulty going forward for private ownership or the city is once COVID is over and we don't have to worry about regulations with respect to group sizes and things, it's really just the financial aspects of them.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
Yeah, I think that COVID has had a direct impact. Many of the events we would have had, I mean, recently we had to do the state of the city on a virtual basis. But many of the events that we've seen in the past in the downtown, and I can remember when the symphony came into the downtown and other groups came, and we would have some of these things with the street closures. Well, the cost of that was on the part of the businesses in the downtown. So a lot of the things that are being discussed and a lot of those events that we are talking about are not events that are paid for by the city. Now, many of those events, if the city participates, and if there has to be city participation, there's costs involved for police services, for public works to set up, and some of those costs are returned back to the groups that are setting it up. But we've worked with the chamber on their events. I would love to see Brea Fest come back. That was a great event for our cultural arts as a fundraiser, but right now we are on hold with those events.
Thank you. Our next question goes first to Ms. Neufeld, and Ms. Neufeld, this one is directed directly to you as well. Quote, you say you will lead our city out of unprecedented economic uncertainty. Where has the current council failed in your opinion, and what would you propose to do differently?
Well, I still think the council's done a great job of what they've been doing so far, but I know that right now, because of COVID, things are different and we don't know how things are going to be in the next several months. And I want to be there to help lead the city out of these unprecedented times, because I know that there's a lot to do and there's a lot of businesses that are still struggling. Even though they're allowed to be open, they're not receiving as much revenue as they have in the past because some people are still afraid to go out. But I want to encourage people to continue to dine in Brea, shop Brea, and to continue to let people know it's as long as we follow the CDC guidelines, we social distance, we wear our masks, we're going to be safe.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick?
I believe that the current council has been very responsive to our businesses, to our residents with respect to COVID. As I mentioned earlier, make no mistake, this will be a game changer for our city when you think about the commercial office space that we have in town, and if or how many or when those office workers will return to those commercial offices. We don't know that, and so we have to be at the ready to respond and be creative in working on that, because of course that's what explains a good chunk of our daytime population increase. So we have to be nimble in terms of realizing as we move through this period and start to recover how that will change our city and what we need to do from there.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff?
I think that if somebody doesn't believe that there's a realization that there's going to be a fiscal impact on all of us in the city with regards to the current situation with COVID, I think they would be kidding themselves. We've already got our staff looking at the budget. We've already got them examining where we can save, where we can cut costs, and how we can keep our city strong and moving forward. I anticipate a balanced budget next year because that is one of the things we've strived for every year. I do not see us having to really dip into our reserves at this point. And I believe that with the steps we're taking, as was mentioned earlier, with an employee replacement issue that we have, we don't replace employees unless we can see a serious need for that employee to be replaced. So when they leave, we're seeing some retirements that will help us with our pension obligation because they'll be coming in at a different rate. And again, I think that the city is actively at this point, under the direction of this council, taking the steps necessary to be able to move and to have a balanced budget without having to worry about the future.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh?
I agree with much of what's said. The only thing I'd like to add is I think that with the commercial buildings and the uncertainty of when they come back, we as a city, and I'm not sure, maybe the council is already working on it, but should try to develop long-term plans a year from now, 2 years from now, because there's always this debate, work from home, not work from home, telecommute, and if the city loses those, the rent revenue from these commercial buildings, what would their future goals be? So again, that's not a question for them, it's just something that I'm throwing out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will go first to Ms. Merrick, and since we've been talking a bit about COVID, it is Related to that, during the current pandemic shutdown, you've mentioned helping Brea local businesses. What specifically do you think you can do?
We'll continue to do what we're already doing. We've partnered with the chamber to accept donations of personal protective equipment and get that out to businesses. And those are donations that are being given out to all businesses. You don't necessarily have to be a chamber member at this time. If you're in Brea, the city wants to help you and the chamber wants to help you as a business. We have also, as mentioned before, worked very quickly with emergency ordinances. As the rules change coming down from the state, we want to be as responsive as possible to our businesses. We actually did not collect the fees for the temporary use permits that allowed outdoor operations when allowed by the governor, and we are instead going to seek reimbursement through the Federal CARES Act. So in every way that we can, we are trying to make things less expensive and move more quickly for our businesses so that they can reopen as soon as they are allowed to do so. We've also had our mayor write some letters to the governor to help with those reopenings.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
I think one of the other things that we've done to help many of our local businesses is those businesses that may owe certain fees and certain dollars to the city, whether it's based on where they're located. We've allowed them to spread those payments out or to defer those payments so they can open. I mean, we've reached out to businesses by suspending certain fees for temporary use permits. We've reached out to businesses, again, as was indicated, by allowing them to do the outside dining. So we are working with our business community, and we have a regular meeting with the Chamber of Commerce to see how we can best serve the business community. And again, those meetings are fruitful. Those meetings provide direction for us, provides direction to the city and to the business community to know how we can work together to make everything work for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
I don't have anything to add. I think that it's great that they're working with the Chamber of Commerce. That's something that I myself would do if I was a city council member. And it's great that Mr. Simroff has wrote the governor to try to work with opening up businesses earlier. I think the best thing we can do right now as someone living in Brea is just continue to support our local businesses. When you go out to eat somewhere in Brea, don't drive next door to another city. When you go grocery shopping, stay in Brea, don't cross over into Fullerton. But otherwise, I think they've done a good job of supporting businesses during COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
I'd have to agree. Thank you for what you've been doing so far. I was actually going to ask the question if we were helping with fees or anything like that, so I do appreciate you guys doing that. And I continue to patronize the businesses here in Brea, especially downtown dining. Sadly, I spend a lot of time there. And I hope that everybody else continues to do the same because I really want to see those businesses stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question goes first to Mr. Siminoff. Mr. Siminoff, it's related to public safety. Ensuring that there are adequate public safety personnel is a concern to residents and businesses alike. How would you ensure that Brea maintains the high level of public safety services currently afforded by the community?
When it comes to public safety, as I indicated earlier, it has always been a top priority in this community. This council and councils prior and councils future will take that priority and they will also run with it. We meet with our public safety officials, our staff does, and when there's a need, we address the needs. If there's a need for additional officers, we'll look at additional officers. If there's a need for additional fire equipment, we'll look for that additional fire equipment. When things come available that we think will enhance the ability to serve this community. A number of years ago, we got thermal imaging equipment so our firefighters could walk into a smoky building and be able to see clear as day. We're looking at getting them one of those, what do they call them, the drone. We're looking to get them a drone so they can actually look at fires if they're in the canyon or actually even look for other personnel. We recently got our fire department a four-wheel vehicle that they can go out into the canyon and search for hikers or other persons that are lost. So we are working actively with our public safety.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
I agree with what he said. I think the big thing that he pointed out, which is important, is that our safety, whether it's police, fire, continue to move forward with adapting new technologies to the best of their ability. Some technology can be expensive, but sometimes it's worth it. As you mentioned, drones, those could be huge. Thermal imaging, all those things can be huge. Personally, I've always thought that Brea has done a great job with maintaining its safety, and that's something that I would want to do. And as Mr. Simroff mentioned, I think it's something that everybody here would be committed to. Brea's safety and its citizen safeties is at the foremost important of, I think, everybody here. So I would work to continue to maintain our level of safety within the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
I agree with what both Marty and Tyler have stated. Public safety is very important. It's very crucial, especially since I have children. There's a lot of break-ins that do occur, and even though it is Brea, and the police department is very quick to handle these situations. So I think everything that the current council is doing is perfect, and I would want to continue to do the same thing.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
Knowing the high value that our community places on public safety, both police services and fire services, we have been very proactive in looking for the best deployment models. We recently had an assessment of our police department, and you may be seeing actually more police cars out on the street. I know I have noticed it in the last few weeks because we recently added a kind of a mid-shift instead of just 12-hour shifts that don't really overlap for much time. There is an overlap in there, and I am seeing more police cars out on the road. We've also changed our fire deployment model in the last few years. So it's a progression. We're moving forward over the next few years. We started a couple years ago. So it's something that we are always discussing. We always want to be offering the best services that we can, public safety and other. And we have made that commitment, and we have made changes recently, and the public should be seeing the results.
Thank you. Also on public safety, our next question will go to Mr. Baugh. Mr. Baugh, public safety typically is a huge percentage of a city's budget, often over half. And one driver for that is often overtime. What can you comment on the public safety budget for the city of Brea and whether or not its overtime costs are appropriate?
Sorry. I cannot necessarily comment because I don't know the number off the top of my head for overtime costs, but I do know that overtime cost is a big driver of the budget. I think that possibly, as mentioned in the previous thing, adding a mid-shift to break up those 12-hour shifts would reduce overtime. It may have a higher upfront cost due to having more officers, but the long-term savings of reducing the overtime pay for various officers or fire department staff, I think would be very cost beneficial to the city in the long run.
Thank you. Ms. Neufeld.
Well, I know that these public safety individuals probably don't want to hear it, but overtime is very costly, and I agree with Tyler. I would want to hire other individuals that could take over some of those shifts to avoid that high cost of overtime.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
Overtime costs are something that we have a keen eye on, and when making decisions, we absolutely look at those potential overtime costs. One thing to realize, however, is that in some departments, for example, police department at this time, we're seeing a lot of retirements, and we are actively working to recruit new officers, to hire laterals from other departments, to have young officers come into our department. But when we are low on officers, the result is often those overtime hours. So we recently actually have been offering like an incentive bonus for new officers who are lateral transfers in our department. That's helping us fill out our department so that we're not like in a barbell with much older or more seasoned officers and then brand new officers. So that is something that we are consistently working with the city manager and our police chief to manage those costs, but also manage the department.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
When it comes to public safety, and whoever asked the question, public safety is an expensive thing to have. It's probably over 50%. It's actually over 50% of our city budget. But again, when we look at the deployment models, and we're looking at those, as Councilmember Merrick pointed out, we're changing the deployment models. Those deployment models are intended to help provide the level of safety that the community wants, help to cover those shifts when there's a shortage of personnel so that we can avoid some of the overtime. We're trying to maximize the return that we get from the deployments we use for police, for fire. A lot of times our firefighters will be out on some of these major fires that are throughout the state. Well, the one advantage we have there is we're reimbursed for those firefighters by the state. So that's overtime that doesn't impact us. So again, we look for deployment models, we look for analysis to see where we can save, but we do realize that, as the question was asked, that public safety is a major expense for the city.
Thank you. Our next question is going to be for Ms. Neufeld, and it is appropriate for one of the non-incumbent members. How have you been involved in city, or have you been involved in city government in any way, meetings, committees, or commissions that prepare you for this position?
No, so I'll be honest, as I stated in my opening statement, I've always put a focus on youth. So I used to be a coach, I would coach youth soccer, Little League, I was a Little League photographer, team parent, I did PTA, I was a room parent, I helped with the art program at the school. So my involvement has always been focused on children. But now that my children are older in high school and junior high, and to be honest, could not care less about me, now I want to focus on the community as a whole. And I know I'm not very well known, and some people may be apprehensive, but I do have a lot of experience in financial services and building relationships.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
I guess less appropriate as an incumbent, but as I mentioned, I was on the Planning Commission for 2 years prior to running for City Council, and I felt that those 2 years were so informative in understanding our general plan, understanding land use and development, also just getting to know people at the city and being aware of meetings, attending meetings other than the Planning Commission. And you know, in Brea, we strive to create opportunities for our residents to become involved, and our committees and our commissions are a great place to start.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
And I probably touched on some of this earlier. I came from a staff background as a police captain, but also during my tenure on the council, I've not just stayed within Brea. I've represented the city on a regional basis, on a statewide basis, and even on a national basis. I've chaired committees for the National League of Cities. I've chaired committees for the League of California Cities. And when I'm interacting with elected officials from throughout the country, throughout the state, I currently sit on a board with the Southern California Association of Governments, the Orange County Council of Governments, and so I'm actively involved in trying to represent this community, bringing back the best of the ideas, the best that we can bring to this community, and I think those experiences just end up being a positive for the community.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
So much like Ms. Newfield, this is my first go at it. The reason why I decided to run is I have a young daughter. She's just turned 2 in August, so I really want to get involved in local government. That way, as she grows up in the city that I grew up loving, she'll get to experience the same things I did. A great family feel, safety, tons of opportunities for the youth, whether sports programs, great schools, which is why I'm running. I haven't been in any boards. I did tell the city clerk that if I do not win, I will join a board to get involved in the city. So either way, I'll be involved in the city somewhat after this. But hopefully I'm going at it and giving myself a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I promised the candidates that I would give them warning when we got to the last question, and this is it. However, it's very repetitive from the one that we just asked, because the one that we just asked was designed to the non-incumbents, and this one is designed to all, and it simply says, how have you best prepared yourself for this position? So with your permission, I think we should just go to closing statements. So the first to give their closing statement this evening would be Ms. Neufeld, and you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm running for City Council to help maintain the city. I won't procrastinate when it comes to revisiting important decisions. My focus is to help guide and lead Brea over the next few years so that it will continue to be a great place to raise a family. I will be an advocate for the community, and I will work to ensure that the problems of today are not here for future generations. I've spent many years as a leader in financial services. As a matter of fact, my employer is local in Brea, and now I want to be a leader for the city that I love almost as much as my boys. I'm here to serve Brea, and I'll always have the interest of her first. And when I'm not working, you'll find me either at the high school, the junior high, the mall, or enjoying a meal at one of our fine establishments in downtown. So please, next time you see me at McAllen's Pub, please sit down and join me for a beer. Now's the time for Brea to make a change, and I want to be a part of it. Let's work together. I'm Robin Neufeld, the new face of Brea.
Thank you. Mr. Baugh.
Thank you again for hosting this, and I just want to say that I got into this campaign hoping to, reach out to young families. I know some of the other candidates have young families as well, or had young families at one point. And I just really want to bring Brea into the year 2021 with hopefully some new ideas. Not that any of the ideas we currently have are wrong, but just a new fresh idea. And even though I may lack the experience, that may bring up some new ideas and a point of view from not only a teacher but a young father that's living and hopefully one day working in the city of Brea. Although it's hard to get in Brea Unified, not many people retire. But anyways, vote for Baugh. A vote for Baugh is a vote for Brea. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Siminoff.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being here and for taking the time. I'd like to thank the viewers at home and those people that have submitted the questions that we've all had an opportunity to respond to. I'd like to say that my desire to run again this time was based on what is happening around us with this pandemic. With the experience that I feel that I can bring in the history I can bring back to my colleagues, I think it's important in moving forward that we utilize that experience, we utilize that knowledge and those relationships to keep Brea moving in a positive direction. I'm actually kind of proud to say that this election cycle, that all of my colleagues have endorsed me. And I think that's a positive coming from them. In the past, I can't say that has happened, but I think with everything going on this year, that I think that's a statement. And again, I'd like to come back one more time and be able to work with the community and get us through this pandemic.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick.
At this precipitous time, in the midst of a pandemic and resulting recession, Brea needs trusted leadership for these trying times. We need to preserve our thriving community of great neighborhoods, schools, services, and businesses. I am committed to protecting the taxes that we all pay and ensuring that city funds are used prudently. I'm committed to preserving programs for our children, our families, and our seniors. And I'm committed to independent decision-making, to effective, respectful communication, and to council debate and consensus building on the issues. I will always encourage partnerships because working together for a common goal is better than working apart. Please go to christineforbrea.com to learn more and to contact me. I look forward to continuing to serve you for the next 4 years as your city council member. Thank you.
Thank you. So on behalf of the City of Brea, the Brea Chamber of Commerce, and the League of Women Voters of North Orange County, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. Thanks to our timekeepers and to the city staff for recording tonight's forum and for making us all very comfortable. Tonight's forum is being recorded. It will be rebroadcast daily on Brea Television at 5:30 p.m. You can also find Brea TV on Spectrum Cable Channel 3, ATTUverse Channel 99, and streamed online at cityofbrea.net/BreaTV. The candidates forum will also be available on demand on the City of Chamber of Commerce and City of Brea YouTube channels. On the League of Women Voters website, lwvnoc.org, you will find links to Voters Edge, where all candidates can put information about themselves free. And you will find links to all candidates' websites at all levels. You can find information about all of the ballot initiatives, pros and cons, which is quite famous. The League is very good at putting popular, unbiased analysis of both sides of the propositions there. Most of all, we thank our candidates for running and for participating in this forum. It is not easy, and without their willingness to serve, our democracy simply would not work. So you all have our debt of gratitude. Good evening. Please do not fail to vote. Thank you.